hybrid hearing on the roles and responsibilities of the Department of Defense IG and the Service Inspectors General. Today we will have two panels. The first panel includes Mr. Gordon Hiddell, who served as the Department of Defense IG from 2008 to 2011. He also served as IG for the Department of Labor and has extensive experience in this area. Ms. Mandy Smithberger of the Project on Government Oversight is our second person to testify about considerations for improving the DOD and service IGs. For full disclosure, she was a wonderful member of my staff about 8 years ago, and it's nice to see you again. In the second panel, we will hear testimony from Mr. Sean O'Donnell, acting DOD IG, and the Military Services IG. While we understand the DOD IG and the service IGs have different roles, responsibility, and authority than other executive agency IGs, I think it's important we examine them closely and make sure that they have the independence, training, staffing, and resources to provide proper oversight. I am concerned about this issue because there has been too many recent examples where the service IGs appear to be asleep at the wheel, lacked independence, and whose responsibilities under service regulations requires confidential advisors of the commander, requires them to be confidential advisors of the commander. From the findings of the FORSCOM IG inspection at Fort Hood that suggested all was fine with the SHARP program there, despite ample evidence that they were not in compliance with the DOD policy, let alone having an effective program, to the lagging investigations into the medical care of Private First Class Delbarba, to the failure of Navy IGs to report sexual harassment allegations against a senior executive to the DOD IG, as they are required to, enabling a serial offender to victimize several more Navy civilian employees and retire with full pension with no accountability, there is mounting evidence of a disturbing trend across the IGs, of which these are just a few examples. Besides the authorities, it's imperative we examine the true independence of the IGs across the department and services. It's unclear to me how someone who works for the commander, who by regulation is supposed to act as the commander's, quote, eyes and ears, unquote, and buy into that commander's leadership philosophy, can also remain impartial when investigating allegations within their own command, especially when those allegations involve retaliation for making a protected disclosure. The last time that the service IGs testified before the subcommittee in 2018, the Army Inspector General made negative comments about whistleblowers, which was stunning to me. If the individuals who are charged with investigating whistleblower reprisal complaints are prejudiced against them to begin with, we have no hope of protecting brave service members and civilians who come forward to protect the American taxpayer and call out wrongdoing. I also think we need to better understand how DOD and the services work together when complaints come in. After all, if a person sends their complaint to the DOD Inspector General hotline, but then the DOD IG passes it to the services to investigate, it seems like we're setting up a false expectation of confidentiality for complainants. Is DOD telling complainants up front that their reports are being shared with the service IGs, who may report to the very commanders who are the subject of the complaint? What is done to protect complainants and ensure a quality investigation that meets a high standard? How is retaliation not the end result, therefore discouraging service members from coming forward? I look forward to digging into this critical set of issues today, and with that, I turn it over to Ranking Member Banks for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to welcome our witnesses on both panels. Today's hearing is an important step in building our members' awareness of the role of inspectors general and the role that they play within the Department of Defense and in the services. Oversight is also an important role played by Congress. In fact, one of the first times the House of Representatives investigated the military was in 1792, due to the defeat of General Arthur Sinclair on the Indiana-Ohio border. I figured I would take the opportunity to selfishly work in some Indiana history for all of you. Like the oversight and investigation responsibilities of Congress, all of the inspectors general here today play a vital role in overseeing, investigating, and preventing fraud, waste, and abuse and mismanagement across the department and the services. They have been challenged by investigations, audits, and evaluations that have run the gamut of issues from major acquisition programs to material readiness to issues involving good order and discipline, all requiring Inspector General organizations that are agile and independent. They also require personnel with the requisite training, experiences, and knowledge to get after the issues and provide recommendations that will inform their organizations and Congress. On panel one, I'd like to understand any recommendations that you may have for the Department of Defense and service IGs on improving their training and education. I'm also interested in your thoughts on whether you think independence is an issue for any or all of these IG organizations. For our panel two witnesses, I'm interested in the manning, training, and equipping of your organizations. Do you have the personnel resources you need to effectively execute your missions? I'm also concerned about the results of the audits, evaluations, and investigations, and whether or not they are often focused on outputs or outcomes. I'd like to understand your thoughts on how we can change that. Again, thank you for your attendance. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his remarks. We'll now move to our first panel. Mr. Gordon Hedel, who is the former Inspector General of the Department of Defense, followed by Ms. Mandy Smithberger, Director for the Center for Defense Information Project on Government Oversight. Thank you both for being here today and for your participation. Mr. Hedel.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and esteemed members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. I am disturbed by the independence or the lack of independence of our military component inspectors general and a command structure that has allowed harassment, assault, and a flagrant disregard by leadership for the Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention Program known as SHARP. There is no place in the armed forces of the United States for bias, discrimination, harassment, assault, or retaliation. Simply stating that we have a zero-tolerance policy will not make it so. The core strength of our armed forces has always been in its leadership and the men and women who follow that leadership. Inequities, however, in the way our military handles harassment and assault investigations are gnawing away at the very fabric of that strength. While working with the TIGs, the Inspectors General of each of the military services, I found them to be men and women of very high character. I would be surprised if that were not still true today. Army Regulation, AR 20-1, the Inspector General Activities and Procedures Regulations, prescribes the responsibility and policy for the selection and duties of Inspectors General throughout the Army. It is, in effect, the Army IG's Bible. However, as I reviewed AR 20-1, I was surprised by statements in the regulation concerning the relationship that is supposed to exist between the commander and component IGs. Some examples. Component IGs only work for their commanders. They are the conscience of their commanders. They must understand the commander's personality. They must be the commander's confidant and serve as confidential advisor to the commander. They must work through the chain of command. There is nothing unusual or improper about a good relationship or respect for the chain of command. What concerns me, however, is that we are talking about the policies and procedures that govern military inspectors general, people who are supposed to be independent. The regulation appears to tacitly imply a reverence for the commander that is inappropriate for an inspector general. Pardon me. I believe there are things that the military services can learn from the Inspector General Act. There is no mention or requirement in the Act that the Inspector General be the Secretary's conscience, that the IG understand the Secretary's personality, or that the IG work through a chain of command. The IG Act does not mince words. It addresses the issue of independence head-on, stating that the head of the establishment shall not prevent or prohibit the Inspector General from completing any audit or investigation. The concept of independence is manifested throughout the IG Act. Lack of independence, or even a perceived lack of independence, is antithetical to congressional intent. I recommend to the military service departments that they, number one, require component IGs to promptly report particularly serious or flagrant problems, abuses, or deficiencies directly to the respective TIG. Number two, establish policy stating clearly that no one has the authority to alter IG reports. Number three, a Central Office of Inspector General legal counsel should be established for the purpose of providing dedicated legal services to support component IGs and no one else. Number four, component IGs must have timely access to all agency records. Number five, component IG assignments should not be considered collateral duty. The position of component IG as it stands now is not a career path, but a stopover on the way to something else. I recommend that component IG nominees successfully undergo training at an IG academy, a state-of-the-art academy, and when successfully completed, certified graduates be appointed to the rank of warrant officer. For the good order and discipline of our military services, I think the time is long overdue. We must provide state-of-the-art training and the appropriate tools to our component IGs. We must make harassment, assault, and retaliation things of the past. We must do this now, once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidell. Ms. Smithberger?
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you again for inviting me to testify today. I want to thank the subcommittee for taking the time to look at whether our Inspector General system is meeting our country's needs. In particular, I'm very encouraged to hear that there's already going to be a focus on two important issues: protecting the independence of inspectors general and their investigations, and having meaningful protections for whistleblowers and survivors who come forward. As Mr. Hidell mentioned, our federal watchdogs perform an essential role in rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. One of their most important responsibilities is their role investigating whistleblower reprisal complaints. However, POGO and government oversight entities have repeatedly raised concerns that the system for protecting military whistleblowers against retaliation is insufficient. The DOD IG system can seem unusually complex. The various roles of the service and the department and component IGs are complementary but slightly different. And to people who are turning to the IG system for help, those differences can be pretty confusing, particularly when they go to the DOD IG hotline. The DOD IG is a civilian statutory inspector general and is supposed to be independent from the department. I think there are a couple of things about those statutory IGs that we want to keep in mind for independence. They have subpoena powers, they have audit functions, and they are also uniquely dual-hatted, reporting both to Congress and to their agency head. In recent years, Congress has strengthened these IGs, most notably by providing each one with their own general counsel and requiring the president to provide congressional notification and justification for their removal and transfer. Service and component IGs have less independence, and when it comes to particularly sensitive investigations like a whistleblower reprisal complaint, we sometimes have concerns that that undermines their ability to effectively do their job. At the component IG level, a Department of Justice Inspector General review found that those offices often struggle to maintain adequate staff and experience because the offices compete for resources for military components engaged in military actions around the world. The same review found fully staffing field IG offices is a lower priority than staffing other service branch components. As Congresswoman Spear mentioned, in most cases, DOD IG hands retaliation allegations over to local or command IGs, who have the least amount of independence and experience in handling what are often highly complex investigations. We have worked with whistleblowers who have turned to that hotline, only to be unpleasantly surprised that their complaint was referred to a service or component IG. Those referrals can feel like being thrown into the lion's den, including potentially exposing whistleblowers to additional retaliation. Despite a number of reforms, the outcomes for whistleblowers still look like a system unlikely to protect truth tellers. DOD IG semi-annual reports to Congress showed the vast majority of reprisal claims are not investigated, and only a handful of those investigated are substantiated. Even when reprisal claims are substantiated, those who retaliate are rarely punished. Remedies for whistleblowers are also elusive, with the vast majority waiting years for any remedy if they receive one at all. Most whistleblowers give up, or they end up fighting for years to get their own records corrected. I would be remiss to note that DOD IG has lacked a permanent leader for over 5 years. This fundamentally undermines the foundation of the department's Inspector General system. Not having a permanent leader, especially for a long period of time, compromises the office's credibility, its independence, its management, and its strategic direction. There are a number of other areas of oversights and reforms that can strengthen both the IG and whistleblower protection system. First, Congress must revise the burdens of proof for military whistleblowers. The odds are stacked against service member whistleblowers. For civilians, the burden of proof to show a personnel action was warranted and therefore not retaliatory rests on agency officials. For members of the military, the reverse is true, and service members must prove that they were illegally retaliated against by showing there was no other reasonable explanation for the adverse personnel action they experienced. Second, we urge the subcommittee to review whether service and component IGs have the legal support that they need. Third, Congress must look at or should consider expanding alternative dispute resolution options for the military to help provide expedient relief. Fourth, all IGs must do more outreach to the public and Congress about their work, including publishing their reports in a timely manner, proactively releasing information to the public that is going to be released anyway under a Freedom of Information Act request, and announcing upcoming projects that aren't law enforcement sensitive. Finally, I hope that service IGs will complete implementation of measures to protect the confidentiality of sources. We all count on inspectors general to warn commanders, senior leaders, Congress, and the public about problems. Their ability to do so depends on effectively working with whistleblowers. When individuals come forward, usually at great personal and professional risk, they must be effectively protected. The perceived and real failures of the system must be addressed. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. I would like to ask unanimous consent that non-subcommittee members be allowed to participate in today's briefing after all the subcommittee members have had an opportunity to ask questions. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. All right, so I am going to forego asking my questions until the end of the panel. So I offer Ranking Member Banks the opportunity now to pursue his questioning.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, for that. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I'd like to understand from both of you whether you have any recommendations regarding how DOD and the services train and educate their IGs. Also, do you think they have what they need in terms of resources to execute their mission? Ms. Smith-Berger, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the question. I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Hiddell a little bit more on some of the training, though. More training is always welcome, and I know DOD IG has been doing a lot to try and enhance that training. But I think something else to look at is for some of these investigations where independence is really important, for some of those investigations, I wonder in some of these cases if the DOD IG should be retaining more of those investigations than they are currently and giving DOD IG more of those resources. As you know, the problem with training, if people are circulating in and out of these service and component IGs, is that this is not going to be part of their long-term career field, and so there's diminishing returns. While if we have a civilian component that has this expertise, I think that's probably a better investment in the long term.
Mr. Hiddell.
Turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The Inspector General Act, I believe, is a really good, perhaps, role model for all IGs. And I think one of the huge concerns that I see is that the component IG skills and the way they do their work, well-meaning, I'm sure, in most respects, has not evolved over the years to be better than it could be. It has, where the inspectors general, the federal inspectors general, DOD IG, for instance, over the years, because of the wisdom of Congress, the initial IG Act of 1978 has been amended and improved and has made the Inspector General a stronger and more capable, a more talented and determined and an independent Inspector General. If that had not occurred, I would say that today that the DOD IG and other federal IGs would be impotent, and the whole concept of IG in federal government would be a failure. But it isn't a failure. Today our IGs are among the most skilled and exceptional executives in government. The same I cannot say is true in terms of our component IGs. They're basically passing through. They do a 36-month rotation into their assignments generally. In my opinion, it takes a lot longer than that to develop the kind of knowledge and commitment and the allegiance to what is right within the ranks of the military. And so just about the time that I think that they're really getting their sea legs, they're moving on to another non-IG assignment. One of the implications is that it reduces the number of mentors that would be around to be helpful. Number two, this idea of component IGs, several thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 of them, it needs to become a profession. It's not, in my opinion, viewed as a profession. There needs to be a very sophisticated, state-of-the-art training academy. And I believe that individuals who are nominated to become component inspectors general should go through the academy. They should be required to pass and then certified. And once they're certified, I believe that they should be appointed to the rank of warrant officer. I have nothing against non-commissioned officers. They're the backbone of our military in many, many ways. But as an inspector general, I think we have to start at a higher level, and we have to work from there. It has to become a profession. The biggest issue facing the component IGs is independence. We have to give these component IGs the backbone and the confidence to do their work and not worry about what their commander says. I really believe that there's too much emphasis on the chain of command, that the component IG is required to go through his or her commander. Now, I have great respect, having been in the military, for the chain of command, but it doesn't work, in my opinion, when it comes to inspectors general. Their chain of command must be directly from them to the respective TIG. Now, that would cause a lot of headaches under the structure today for the TIGs to take that kind of, intimate control of the situation, but I think that's necessary. We've reached a point with respect to assault, harassment, retaliation. All of these things are undermining. When I was in the military, and I'm sure it's true today, the central thought among rank and file members is that the military takes care of its own. Well, I'm sure they still believe in that, and I'm sure to a great extent they do. But that's not happening. There are too many people left behind.
A lot of really great comments, and with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to yield back.
All right, thank you. I think what we're going to do now is recess for about, I'm sorry, we're not going to recess, we're going to suspend for about, I guess, 20 minutes. Actually, wait a minute. Maybe what we'll do is go to Ms. Escobar for 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hiddell, I want to pick up where you just left off because I'm very curious about where you were headed with your comments with regard to the challenges around chain of command, trying to remove oneself from conflict of interest, and the added challenge with the component IGs that rotate out. What do you think, if you had to re-envision the component IGs, and actually this is a question for both of our panelists, if you had to re-envision this, what would the best practices be, and what would it look like?
You know, I think a very good, I'm speaking as a former Army aviator, and so I sort of use that as my role model here, in that training is what's going to make inspectors general at the component level really competent and dedicated and able, and who buy in to the concept that everyone deserves protection. When they can't get it, it undermines the order and discipline of the military. And that's not happening. So training is the first thing. And I think there needs to be an academy, a real, true-to-life academy that is focused entirely on inspectors general at the component level. And they need to be, those nominees that go to that academy need to pass the course and be certified. If they're not certified, they don't become inspectors general. If they are certified, as I said earlier, I think they should be appointed warrant officer rank. It's a professional rank, and I think it raises the whole idea of inspectors general at the component level to a profession. And rotating people out after 36 months to something that's not related, they have no commitment. And frankly, I do think that when they know they're going to be rotated out to a non-IG position, they may be thinking about, how am I going to be received when I go to the non-IG world? I think we have to remove any concerns that an IG might have that somehow they're going to be treated differently because they were an IG. The other thing is the chain of command. There is far too much emphasis in the Army Regulation 20-1 for the reverence that a component IG must show to the commander. There are too many approvals that the commander must provide that really it should be the TIGs providing. An example, if a component IG is sees that he's got a criminal investigation on his hands, but of course he or she does not have the law enforcement authority to conduct that criminal investigation, they're required to go to their commander, and then it's up to the commander to decide whether to ask, in the Army's case, the CID to open an investigation. They may or they may not, depending on the facts, but the component IG is really, he's dependent on what that decision is. I think that decision, when it comes to criminal investigation, should be made with the TIG. The other thing, I think there's a real problem with respect to legal counsel. The TIGs have their own legal counsel, I believe, but the component IGs have to submit a request for advice, and they don't know what kind of a lawyer or attorney they're going to get. And they don't know whether that attorney, whether his or her loyalties go to the commander or to someone else. We need a commitment that component IGs have a committed legal counsel that will support them. These are the kinds of things that will create independence on the part of the IG. It'll create confidence, and it'll create confidence by the people that are retaliated against, who are harassed, who are assaulted. Because right now, if I'm a person that is a victim of harassment and I read AR 20, I'd have to really think twice before I would go to the component IG. It's
Mr. Hidell, I'm so sorry. We are out of time. Thank you for your response. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. We will now suspend for 20 minutes and return. Again, our apologies. This is the nature of our vote today. We will reconvene then in 20 minutes. Thank you. All right, we will now reconvene the Military Personnel Subcommittee, and Mr. Fallon, you are next. You are recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Fallon? Can someone contact Mr. Fallon so he knows that he is up? All right, I see Ms. Strickland is with us. Ms. Strickland, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the issues that I'm especially interested in is diversity, equity, inclusion within the department. And under the leadership of Congressman Brown in the last session, the NDAA included several provisions related to diversity. So as I think about, the conversation about the inspectors general, do you believe that we are sufficiently independent in order to ensure that this topic specifically will be investigated the way it should? And then are there other areas within the DEI sphere that you can explore and investigate?
Is that question for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, actually the question is for both of you.
Oh. Well, I'll take that first.
Okay.
I think the problem is that at the component IG level, the issue of independence is a problem. And that needs to be addressed by a variety of suggestions, recommendations. To the biggest one, I think, is simply training and making the component IG a profession that person would go on throughout their career and be an inspector general, and it would be a commitment lifelong.
Thank you for the question. I think in addition to independence, we need to just look generally at command climate issues. When you look at the Department of Defense Inspector General semi-annual reports, it's pretty striking how many instances there are of people being retaliated against because they have tried to use the EO system. So I think that it is a significant challenge. I know that we are adding to the capacity of the Department of Defense Inspector General to work on these issues, but this is a significant challenge for the force. That independence is extremely important, but obviously it goes to climate as well.
Great, thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Gentlelady yields back. Is Ms. Bice available or Mr. Brown? Mr. Fallon, Mr. Bice, Mr. Brown, Mr. Kim. Any of those members are nearby, we're happy to have them ask their questions. While we wait for them, I will pursue my line of questioning. In your testimony, let me just get to it first. In your testimony, Mr. Hiddell, you referenced that the regulations suggest the IGs provide commanders with undocumented informal verbal reports, which is a recipe, as you put, for suspicion and uncertainty about their independence. I don't recall if you, in your list of improvements, if you recommended that these be made.
In the interest of time, the 5-minute requirement, I did not list that, but it is an important one because nothing that an inspector general does should be informal. Advice should not be informal. It should all be documented. And that again goes back, Chairwoman Spear, to the idea that component IGs are expected to have a certain loyalty to their commander, and that they can have these private, off-the-record conversations when they shouldn't happen like that. I'm not saying that all conversations have to be formal, when you're dealing with a commander. I'm saying that these are conversations about their work and about their investigations and oversight. As I read the regulation, that is what the commander expects, that they will, as the regulation said, circulate among the personnel and observe, make observations for the commander, and discuss those informally with him or her, and undocumented. And so I just see that as a very serious problem in the regulations.
Well, I concur with you on that, and I was surprised to see that that's the recommended method. Ms. Smithberger, you had referenced this alternative dispute resolution program that would be helpful. It is operational where at the present time?
So currently, it is operational both at the Office of Special Counsel and the Department of Defense Inspector General. And just on your previous question, one of the reasons that we think it would be really helpful for the service IGs in particular to announce their upcoming work is that we want to make sure that those investigations become investigations and reports and not just conversations from one commander to another commander, so that helps to hold everyone accountable.
So you're saying with the dispute resolution program is presently with the DOD IG, is that what you said?
Correct.
And you're recommending that it be made available at the service level as well, is that correct?
Either at the service level or as part of a DOD IG, it's not currently available to military service members.
So who is it being used by?
Civilians.
I see, okay. And do you have any data on that and how it's working?
We do. It's included in semi-annual reports, but I'm happy to provide more for the record.
Okay, if you would do that for the record, that would be helpful, thank you. Let's see. I think that's all the questions I have. I really very much appreciate your testimony today. It's very helpful for us to be able to hear from those who have served, those who evaluate it. Maybe I have just one last question. It appears in Smithberger's testimony, you indicated that, if I can find it, you referenced the 2019 roll call story that found that only one of the 350 officials that the IGs determined had retaliated against whistleblowers was fired. So I'm presuming from that there were 350 cases that were brought by whistleblowers in which they confirmed that there was retaliation, but only one of those officers was fired. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that alarming to either of you?
I think it sends the signal that retaliation is tolerated and is an inconvenience at most.
Mr. Hiddell?
It is alarming, but I don't think that it's unusual in terms of statistics over the last 10, maybe even 15 years, maybe even while I was an Inspector General. And it is alarming, but I don't think it's unusual. So much has gone unreported, and so much that is reported that is investigated. I will say it is under-investigated. That's the term I would use, meaning that you don't see many substantiations, and I think the statistics alone tell you that there is a concern.
All right. Thank you very much. My time has expired. Your presentations are complete. I don't believe we have any other members who wish to be heard, so thank you very much. We will change out our panelists. All right, we welcome our second panel, which includes Mr. Sean O'Donnell, the Acting Inspector General for the Department of Defense, Lieutenant General Leslie Smith, Lieutenant General Sami Said, Vice Admiral Richard Snyder, and Major General Robert Castelvi. All right, each witness will provide a brief statement, and each member will have the opportunity to question the witnesses for 5 minutes. We ask that our witnesses summarize their testimony in 5 minutes. Your written statements will be made part of the record. We are now going to start with the Acting Inspector General of the Department of Defense and the confirmed Inspector General of the Department of, no, the EPA, is that correct? So you are wearing two hats. Mr. O'Donnell, you are recognized.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the roles and responsibilities of the Inspectors General of the Department of Defense and the military services. In January 2020, I was sworn in as the Inspector General of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and since April 2020, I have served concurrently as the Acting Inspector General of the Department of Defense. Today, I'm here representing the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. Through the IG Act, Congress established the DOD OIG as an independent and objective unit to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and abuse in DOD programs and operations, to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of those programs and operations, and to help ensure ethical conduct throughout the DOD. Perhaps the most important hallmark of the DOD OIG is its independence. This independence ensures the objectivity of our work and safeguards our operations against efforts to influence or obstruct. Congress has protected our independence by, among other things, placing the IG under the general supervision of the Secretary of Defense, meaning the Secretary cannot direct or prevent the work of the DOD OIG unless such a prohibition is necessary to preserve national security. In addition, Congress also requires that the DOD OIG receive timely access to all documents and other information available to the department. The DOD OIG employs approximately 1,750 dedicated oversight professionals. We are responsible for, among other things, one of the largest financial statement audits in history, evaluating highly complex and highly classified DOD programs, investigating billions of dollars in potential fraud. To put our overall work into perspective, in fiscal year 2020, the DOD OIG issued 138 audit and evaluation reports, contributed to criminal recoveries of $2.69 billion, conducted 35 administrative investigations, and oversaw 499 senior official or retaliation investigations completed by the military services and the defense agency OIGs. We do all this despite having a proportionally smaller staff than other federal IGs. As a point of comparison, the larger federal OIGs typically have a ratio of departmental staff to OIG staff of between 50-1 and 200-1. The DOD OIG ratio is closer to 1,700-1. The DOD OIG is not alone in ensuring robust oversight of the DOD. We are part of what we call the Defense Oversight Community, which includes the 4 military service IGs, the military criminal investigative organizations, the Service Auditors General, and the defense agency IGs. The IG Act recognizes the important role of this community by, among other things, requiring that the DOD OIG give particular regard to the community's work with an eye toward avoiding duplication and ensuring coordination and cooperation. To this end, I chair the Defense Council on Integrity and Efficiency, which brings our community together through various committees and working groups. In addition, I meet quarterly with the service IGs to discuss common issues. One of the most significant ways in which we interact with the Department of Defense is through the DOD hotline. We offer the DOD hotline as a confidential, reliable means to report without fear of reprisal allegations of fraud, mismanagement, or misconduct that involve DOD personnel and operations. Last year, the DOD hotline received approximately 16,000 contacts. This volume often requires the DOD OIG to refer hotline contacts to an appropriate entity within the defense oversight community. For senior official misconduct allegations, we will generally assume responsibility for conducting investigations against 3- and 4-star generals and flag officers, presidential appointees, and senior executive service members in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Similarly, we will generally refer misconduct against 1- and 2-star general and flag officers and SES members within a service to the corresponding service IG. With respect to whistleblower retaliation allegations, the DOD IG handles complaints involving DOD contractors and other select employees, security clearances, and sexual assaults. We will generally refer whistleblower retaliation allegations involving military service members to their respective service IG. Even when we refer a contact to another entity, we retain oversight responsibility. As such, we require that the receiving entity conduct an inquiry according to quality standards that ensure independence and objectivity. For most referrals, we also require that the receiving entity submit a written report to the DOD OIG for oversight. If we determine that the report does not meet our quality standards, we will return the report to resolve the deficiency. We engage the Defense Oversight Committee in other ways too. Most notably and relevant to this committee is our continuing implementation of our oversight of diversity and inclusion in the DOD and the handling of supremacist and extremist criminal gangs in the armed forces as required by Section 554. Finally, we also undertake quality assurance reviews of the service IG's administrative investigations. In closing, overseeing increasingly complex DoD programs and operations, as well as hotline and other complaints, requires the best staff, training, and resources, not only for the DoD OIG, but also for the service IGs and the broader defense oversight community. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon, and I look forward to answering your questions.
I thank you, Inspector General. We'll now hear from Lieutenant General Leslie Smith, the Inspector General of the Army.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and distinguished members of the Military Personnel Subcommittee, good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant General Leslie C. Smith, the Army's Inspector General. Thank you for the privilege of appearing before you today to speak about the Army Inspector General system and how we function to assist soldiers, Army civilians, and family members. On behalf of the Acting Secretary of the Army, Honorable Mr. Whitley, and our Army Chief of Staff, General McConville, thank you for your support to the military. We exist for one thing, to help ensure the readiness of our Army. Since the creation of the U.S. Army Inspector General system 243 years ago, Inspectors Generals have been charged to inspect, observe, train, and report misconduct. This duty has evolved to our 4 key functions: inspections, assistance, investigations, and training. At the Department of the Army, I am independent, and I report directly to the Secretary of the Army. However, in accordance with Title 10 U.S. Code, I'm charged by law to fully cooperate with the Department of Defense Inspector General. And we achieve this cooperation by resolving allegations of whistleblower reprisal, DOD hotline, and Army senior official misconduct, all under the direct oversight of the Department of Defense. At the Department of the Army level, we conduct independent inspections of systemic issues and also resolve allegations of misconduct, fraud, waste, and abuse. We refer other allegations that represent criminal misconduct to Army's Criminal Investigation Command and discrimination cases to equal opportunity officers. Additionally, we provide policy, training, and assistance to Army IGs worldwide. We also provide trend analysis and impartial advice to Army senior leaders in all components. For example, our Inspectors General Director is in direct support of the Army's focus on countering harmful behaviors. This effort includes behaviors such as sexual assault, sexual harassment, discrimination, and extremism, among others. Also, being independent affords us the ability to understand the scope and challenges the Army faced during the privatized housing crisis and to recommend solutions to Army senior leaders. We're able to quickly shift our assets to deploy to 73 locations across the United States to get a strategic look at the problem. Across our Army, we have 1,441 Inspectors General and 208 IG officers. We train each of these IGs through our Inspector General School, certified by me and the Secretary of the Army, with additional advanced courses and continuing education to produce effective IGs. In this capacity, these field IGs meet the readiness needs and goals of those field commanders. All Army IGs work within the parameters of our guiding regulation. That means they're responsible to their respective commanders, but responsive to me and the Secretary of the Army. Every Army IG takes an oath to uphold the standards of the Army without prejudice or partiality, even when the Army may be the problem. These words represent a tall order and one that all IGs take very seriously. If an IG falls short of this standard, I take it very seriously. And I have the authority to revoke their credentials. While I don't enjoy this requirement, I've taken steps to revoke several IG credentials, both military and civilian. We occupy a position of public trust, and we must never violate that trust. In closing, Army IGs and the Inspector General Agency are both independent and integrated. We are independent and provide credible and impartial oversight. We're also integrated, serving vertically and laterally as the eyes, ears, voice, and conscience of our commanders in the field, helping preserve the Army's readiness through our 4 critical functions: inspections, assistance, investigations, and training. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector General. Next, we will hear from Lieutenant General Sami Saeed, Inspector General for the Air Force.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today along with my colleagues to discuss our roles and responsibilities as service IGs. I'm mindful of the limited time today and a number of witnesses, so I'll keep my comments very brief. We've provided the committee with detailed information on the roles and responsibilities of the Department of the Air Force Inspector General. So I'll avoid covering such information in any detail, but let me offer a few points to frame the dialogue. Generally, the Department of the Air Force IG is charged with independently assessing through investigations, inspections, and reviews the readiness, efficiency, and discipline of the Department of the Air Force, which includes both the Air Force and the Space Force. To empower full independence, the Department of the Air Force IG and its subordinate organizations reside within the Secretariat chain, and the Inspector General reports directly to the Secretary of the Air Force. All authorities of the Department of the Air Force IG and all organizations within directly emanate from the Secretary of the Air Force to the Air Force Department of Air Force IG. At the Department of the Air Force level, the IG organization is composed of 3 field operating agencies and 4 directorates, all serving both the Air Force and the Space Force. Below the Department of the Air Force level, we have Inspector General presence at 186 installations, supporting both our major commands in the Air Force and our field commands in the Space Force. IGs below the Department of the Air Force level support and report to their chain of command. However, Department of the Air Force IG retains oversight of their inspections and their investigations. DAF IG also issues the policies that govern the field's IG's responsibilities and mission and provides training for all Inspector Generals in the Department of the Air Force. Across the department, we have 2,620 airmen and guardians performing IG duties, of which 1,880 are military and 740 are civilians. Total funded billets, though, for the mission stand at 1,886. The mix of civilians and military is very important to us. Our military IGs offer experience, but also critically important currency in the issues they're charged to inspect and to investigate. Our civilian IGs bring a wealth of experience and provide helpful continuity. Our partnership and collaboration with all our sister service IGs and DOD IG is, in my view, exceptionally good. We receive very helpful and healthy oversight from DOD IG, and across the services, we share lessons learned and best practices with each other. We fully cooperate with DOD IG and have well-established oversight and handoff guidelines that are common to all of us that work well. Independence of the IG at all levels is highly respected and cherished and protected within the Department of the Air Force. This element of independence is critical to executing the mission at all levels. Although field IGs report to their chain of command, the results of their inspections and investigations are independent and oversighted at multiple levels. If any IG experiences undue influence, they will up-channel their concerns to their next higher level in the IG chain, all the way up to DAF IG. All IGs serve under common standards of conduct. In terms of overall capacity and resourcing, we have generally received appropriate support and priority. However, as with other organizations, we have some capacity shortfalls, primarily at the installation level, which we're working to address. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant General. Next, we'll hear from Vice Admiral Richard Snyder, Inspector General for the Navy.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and Military Personnel Subcommittees, members, thank you very much for having us here today to discuss the roles, responsibilities, and authorities of the service's Inspectors General. As the Naval Inspector General, my office and duties are established by statute, specifically 10 U.S. Code Section 8020. I report directly to the Secretary of the Navy and have the authority to inspect, investigate, and/or inquire into any and all matters affecting the discipline or the military efficiency of the Department of the Navy. I am the Senior Administrative Investigative Official in the Department of the Navy and the Principal Advisor to the Secretary, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps on all matters concerning inspections and investigations. I am the Inspector General for both the Department of the Navy and the Navy as a service. The Office of the Naval Inspector General ensures an independent and objective evaluation of all complaints within NAV IG's purview, with the exception of complaints retained by the Department of Defense IG. We conduct periodic inspections of commands and regions to assess program compliance, program effectiveness, and risk to the Department of the Navy. We also have an intelligence oversight responsibility. Findings of our investigations and inspections are provided to the chain of command for action deemed appropriate. We are not involved in criminal investigations nor audits, as my office is separate and distinct from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and the Naval Audit Service. The Navy IG enterprise is large, consisting of 27 Echelon 2, 66 Echelon 3, 49 Echelon 4, and 2 Echelon 5 Command IGs, who report administratively to me for policy and oversight and report operationally to their respective echelon commander for most command-level matters. This structure provides the supported commander a valuable command-level resource for executing their duties of command. Each of our IG offices has both an investigation and inspection function. Because we have a large worldwide enterprise with considerable activity, we've taken steps to ensure consistency and effectiveness throughout the enterprise. I expect every IG, regardless of where they are within the enterprise, to perform their roles in a fair, impartial, and independent manner. My office is responsible for providing policy guidance, training, and professional oversight to that end. IG offices at more senior echelons provide additional oversight and may perform IG functions should there be any concern about capability, fairness, or impartiality. We're required by statute to cooperate with the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General. In particular, our senior official cases and military whistleblower reprisal cases are worked closely with our legal staff and are reviewed by the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General for quality, accuracy, and oversight approval. Cases are sometimes referred from the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General to my office, and from my office to lower echelon Navy IG offices for information only or for appropriate action. Action referrals require a feedback report to the referring office for review and oversight. During my almost 3-year tenure as the Naval Inspector General, I've witnessed a team of Navy IG professionals dedicated to performing accurate, fair, and neutral investigations and assessments. Our goal is to provide timely, accurate, and meaningful information to enable Navy warfighting readiness and support to our sailors, Navy civilians, and their families. Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and Military Personnel Subcommittee members, thank you for your continued support of the Navy and our people, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Inspector General. Next, we're going to hear from Major General Robert Castelvi, Inspector General of the Marine Corps.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, Subcommittee members, thank you for the warm welcome and the opportunity to appear before you today along with my colleagues to discuss the roles and responsibilities as Service Inspectors General. As the Inspector General of the Marine Corps, I am the senior investigative official within the Marine Corps, and I support the Secretary of the Navy and the Commandant of the Marine Corps to promote institutional effectiveness, efficiency, discipline, ethics, integrity, and combat readiness. I'm the principal advisor to the Commandant on all matters concerning inspections and investigations, and I communicate directly and independently with the Secretary of the Navy, the Department of Defense Inspector General, and the Naval Inspector General on all Marine Corps matters. My staff and I perform this vital role through impartial and independent inspections, assessments, inquiries, administrative investigations, and we do it without influence, pressure, or coercion. I report our findings to the Secretary of the Navy and the Commandant. Since assuming this position less than a year ago, not once, I mean that, not once, have I ever felt any pressure or influence from either one of them or their staffs. You know, we proudly refer to ourselves as the standard bearers of our Corps, the place you go to get the answer to what right should look like. But my team is supplemented by 41 command inspectors general, some of the finest officers I've met, many of them either in person or virtually, and they're assigned to every general officer command across the Marine Corps. These command IGs work directly for their commander and serve as a functional extension. I call them a connecting file within the enterprise to me and my team at IGMC. They provide their commander with the same support my office provides the Commandant within the authorities of the individual commander. But it's important to know that they're not out there on their own. My office plays a key role providing training, support, oversight, and really mentorship, and I vet their selection for these local command IGs, and we inspect them to ensure their independence, their compliance with applicable regulations. Although the level of authority and the sphere of influence varies, all IGs have the same fundamental duties. That includes conducting inspections and providing assistance and responsibility to investigate allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse of authority. Statute dictates our cooperation with the DOD IG, who provides oversight on all our work on senior official and military whistleblower reprisal cases. The DOD IG reviews our work for quality, thoroughness, and accuracy for these cases, as well as any cases they refer to us. Following their review, the findings of our investigations and inquiries are provided to the Marine Corps leadership for appropriate action. You know, the relationship between DOD IG and IGMC is very similar to the relationship between our office and our local IGs. Each commander enjoys the benefit of an IG to manage local issues, conduct local inspections, investigate local matters, and keep a pulse of the things that affect the morale, discipline, and climate of the unit. Whereas IGMC serves as the eyes and ears of the Commandant, we spend about 50% of our time on the road. Command IGs serve as the eyes and ears of their individual commander. Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and Military Personnel Subcommittee members, thank you for your continued support to IGMC and your Corps of Marines. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Inspector General. Thank you all for your presentations. I'm now going to offer the ranking member 5 minutes to ask his questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder for each of you if you could let us know if, as you adapt to meet today's mission, if you're considering any organization or personnel changes. Start down here at this end of the table.
Don't forget the DOD IG.
Yes, sir. We have looked at a reorganization of our office, and that has taken place over this last several months. I told the Commandant when I first took over that I needed about 2 months to understand where we could find some better efficiencies and provide some better oversight. I felt that there were some things like timeliness of our investigations that needed to be improved. I thought there needed to be some better checks and balances within our own office. We needed to strengthen some of the roles, for example, the Chief of Staff and our investigators. So I'm pleased to say that has been an effective look, and I'm ready to put that in place this coming up summer with some personnel changes.
Yeah, Ranking Member, for the Navy side, really 3 things I would focus on. We've had an ongoing effort to take what I refer more of an enterprise approach to the way we do business. You heard about the various echelons, and my goal has been to bring us together and not stovepipe by command or by echelon. And so we put several things in place to try and work things better as an enterprise, because that's how we're going to get things done. Just recently, we brought up some of the investigators from a lower echelon who had less workload than us. We brought them onto our staff on an assignment temporarily to help us out. That was enabled by the virtual environment we're in now, which is that second area we're looking to take advantage of, both in the way we work and the way we inspect. Our inspections were done almost exclusively in person. We've been able to leverage the virtual environment to help that now. And then lastly, looking at processes. Our caseload continues to go up, and we can certainly continue to put more people to that problem, but there's also an opportunity with process improvement.
Ranking Member, I think you asked about organizational change, as in moving the boxes on the wiring diagram, we don't have any major reorganization initiatives underway, but we have quite a few process initiatives underway. How to better inspect, what to inspect, how to improve timeliness. Those are process issues, but not reorganizational issues.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I think for us, we really are looking hard at the military-civilian mix, not only at the Department of the Army level, but also at the subordinate IGs. I think the other aspects that we've learned from some recent things of increasing the number of surveys that we execute and the analytics that we use to look at the details of those, because that helps us to give a better view for the Secretary and then the subordinate commanders. And then lastly, it's the oversight. At my level especially, my impact of making sure that the subordinate IGs understand the significance and importance of timeliness and responding to those allegations, that's the most important.
Lieutenant General Smith, will stick with you. When was the last time that you updated or refreshed your training or education program?
Oh, it is after every course it's updated. So that 3-week course that's at the Inspector General School on Fort Belvoir, we do an analysis of each one of those classes. Even through the virtual form that which we've continued to execute, we strongly look at those courses. And as we speak, please, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So Ranking Member, same. We get feedback after every course, and we adjust the course material based on the feedback. We also cross-check what our sister services are teaching, and we get the best practices from them, similarly with DOD IG.
Okay. Admiral?
We've really had a sea change in the last year. We've been forced to go virtual, and we took that opportunity to also revamp what we're teaching. We added a course, NAV IG 101, and we've also brought in training professionals to assist our IG professionals in delivering that training.
Major General?
We too had to go virtual, and we also found that we had a gap. We needed to develop very quickly an IGMC 101 version as a bridging solution till we can get an MTT online. And because we were watching some rookie mistakes being made by brand new command IGs that just needed a little bit more mentoring, needed to get trained earlier rather than later. And with the COVID environment that we were in, we found ourselves needed to make sure that we had a bridging solution, and we've unveiled that.
Got it. Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Vice Chair Escobar, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and many thanks to our panelists. I have a question actually about the command IGs. If you all wouldn't mind, each one of you sharing with me, from your perspective, if you could describe the relationship between command IGs in your service and the commanders. And I'm wondering if you have any recommendations or thoughts on how we can ensure absolute independence, objectivity, lack of conflict of interest in that relationship, or in the work that the command IGs do. So whoever would like to go first.
Thank you, Representative. So the command IG's relationship with the commander is twofold. They are responsible to the commander, but responsive to me. So what that means is we have oversight of everything that they do. So they work with the commander to work the actions that are local, but every one of the cases that are worked, we have electronic views that we can see what the level of work they're doing and how that's being executed. And I would just tell you, we keep the independence because of the oversight that we have. Every quarter, I review the top cases that are, what in my viewpoint, sometimes are lagging to find out where we are, how we can improve those. Thank you.
Representative Escobar, same for us. At the installation level, which is the lowest level where we have IG functions, they're a critical tool to our commanders because they have two roles. They're doing what we call complaints resolutions, and they're hearing the complaints and the concerns of our airmen and guardians, and they're attempting to deal with them on behalf of the commander. And we can talk more about that if you'd like. They're also helping the commander assess their internal readiness, their ability to deploy and employ, right? They're not providing the grade for the readiness at the installation level. That's being conducted at a higher level. They're similar to the Army. Their independence is tight because although they report to the chain of command, I have oversight of them in terms of the guidance that's given to them of how they execute, the training that they get, the authority to overturn their investigations and their inspections, and the ability to reach down if we sense any undue influence.
Congresswoman, for us, we have quite a few civilians in the down echelon IG offices, and in fact, a large number of our non-headquarters IG folks are civilians. At those larger commands, our echelon 2 commands, frequently you'll have the IG and the deputy IG one will be a civilian, one will be a military. So we have the continuity and the experience of the civilian folks in the command IGs, but then we have the operational experience and military awareness of those military IGs. Like everyone else has mentioned, that oversight piece is very important to us. Those IGs know that they can, but frankly must, move up to a higher echelon if what they have is either feels inappropriate or unable to be handled at their level. And then lastly, it's my relationship with those commanders as well. I have complete authority and obligation to reach out to those commanders if anything's brought to my attention that's inappropriate on their behalf. And I expect them to do the same with me if the IGs aren't doing what they expect them to do.
I think we have a similar model, and I think it works for us. We have a military and civilian mix. In most cases, it's the military that we have as the SIG with an experienced civilian that's providing that continuity. And I heard in the previous panel about the talk about putting warrant officer in there. I got to tell you, what works for us is having just experienced lieutenant colonel and colonel command IGs that actually have the credibility to be able to be able to represent that commander and inspect and adjudicate and provide and understand the independence, and be able to walk to another commander and say, hey, you got a serious issue here, and I know because I've been in your shoes. So it's important for us for the currency, we believe, to have those IGs to have credibility. But we have to make sure that we have them appropriately trained. And I brief every commander's course. We brief them and train them in our quarterly symposiums, and that's the key. If you train them appropriately and emphasize their importance of their independence, make sure that the general officers that they work for and the commanders they work for understand the importance of that independence, and this works as a good model.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. I'm out of time. Madam Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. Ms. Bice is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service and for being with us this afternoon. My first question is to Mr. O'Donnell. Did I hear correctly that you are acting IG for DOD as well as IG for the EPA?
Yes, ma'am.
That seems like a rather large undertaking to be able to manage both of those. Is that sort of a temporary situation?
As the title indicates, acting, yes, it is temporary. It is a handful, but on both offices, I'm blessed with really competent staff and committed professionals.
Thank you. Okay. It was mentioned earlier that the IG position, I think it's for the services is for 36 months. Do you all feel like that maybe impedes the opportunity to learn and train, and maybe that time frame needs to be reevaluated?
Thank you for the question. The position is actually for 46 months or 4 years. Yes, so the 48 months. I think it gives you the credibility as you select a commander with operational background, similar to the comments that we heard earlier, that they know the other commanders, but they understand who they work for. It's clear that I work for the Secretary of the Army, and all know that, and that's where my loyalties lie. And our job is to make sure we understand the issues and concerns that subordinate commanders may have, but also those IGs, because we've had inspectors general work for us before. So we bring both of that knowledge of having the experience with commanders and also having had IGs work for us before.
And very similarly, so experience, currency, both are important. And as you heard from the opening statement, we have a mix of both military IGs and civilian IGs. On the military side, they're rotating at a higher rate than the civilians. The civilians provide exceptional experience and continuity. On the military side, we need recency and currency in the issues that the IGs are inspecting and or investigating. For instance, we do nuclear inspections, we do inspections of readiness, and currency in what you're inspecting is critically important. Having done that mission set 10 years ago is very different than having just come out of an operational command and having executed that mission. You know the latest and greatest tactics, techniques, and procedures that are relevant. Therefore, your inspections and your results are more accurate. So you need that credibility with recency, and that's what the military brings to the mix. Yes, they rotate at a higher rate, but there's a good balance between the two.
Congresswoman, I'll just add, I'm sorry, just a couple of things I would add. Most of our military folks are in the inspections branch or division, and so that currency is important, and yes, they do rotate more frequently. Many of our civilians have been around for a very long time. For me in particular, typically a 36-month tour. My deputy is a civilian deputy who's been there before I got there and hopefully will be there for a long time. And my chief of staff is a civilian who has decades of experience at Navy IG. So the last thing I'll add is I didn't think I had been an IG before either, but what I've learned is going out and identifying standards, assessing performance to those standards, and making recommendations to make the organization better. It's what we've done our whole career, and that's what we do as IGs.
Congressman, I'll just reinforce my colleagues real quickly and some of the key things that I think are common that we all feel are important here. It's credibility, it's experience, it's currency. So you have that continuity with the key civilians you have as your deputy. I have one that's been in that billet for 7 or 8 years now, and he was a retired colonel before that. Brings a great depth of experience. What he lacks is that currency of what's happening in the Fleet Marine Force at this time, not had a more recent command experience out there. So I think we have a very good mix, I think. Our inspections team is headed across the entire headquarters Marine Corps of subject matter experts. A good number of those are civilians, so it's a decent mix, and I think it seems to work.
Thank you, gentlemen, and my time has expired, so I'll yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bice. Mr. Jackson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate it. And thank you to the witnesses for being here today. After 25 years of active duty service to my country and retiring as a flag officer in the United States Navy, I know what it means to sacrifice and to serve my country. I served under 3 different presidents in the White House Medical Unit, including 8 years in President Barack Obama's tenure when I was promoted to Admiral. It was not important to me whether the president I was serving was a Republican or a Democrat. I, of course, am a Republican, but I was not concerned whether my patient and the person I served was a Republican or a Democrat. I was going to do the best of my job to the best of my ability. During that time in the military, I served alongside a diverse group of sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines. When I was deployed to Iraq to lead a resuscitative medicine team in efforts on the battlefield to combat serious injuries on the battlefield, I didn't care the person's gender, their sexual orientation, their political views, their race, or who they were. I fought alongside them, and I fought to save their lives. I did what I needed to do, plain and simple. There were thousands before me, there will be thousands after me that served this country honorably, and we all do it to protect one thing, the United States of America. Unfortunately, right before our eyes, everything is being politicized, including what is supposed to be a nonpartisan Department of Defense. I'm frustrated and deeply disappointed that the organization that I dedicated my life to and that my family has dedicated their life to is falling victim to what I consider to be woke culture. President Biden has requested that we cut spending for the Department of Defense and has proposed a top-line number that does not keep up with inflation and definitely does not support the 3 to 5% growth the National Defense Strategy calls for. Additionally, he requested that the Department of Defense fund social initiatives and promote the New Green Deal. This will, in fact, force the Department of Defense to make difficult decisions to cut key programs that could protect our country in an effort to promote what I consider a political agenda. What are a few things that the Biden administration is placing as a lower priority for the Department of Defense than the New Green Deal and the social incentives? Number 1, countering biological threats, modernizing our military, and taking care of our military families. It truly troubles me how deeply political things have gotten and how this administration appears to be weaponizing and politicizing organizations like the Department of Defense to advance their agenda. My first question, as part of this In recent cases, undermanning, inadequate staffing, and poor training have opened the door for the DOD IG to follow political bias instead of due process. In these cases, the DOD IG predetermines the conclusion that they want to reach, and due to a lack of staff, sometimes inadequate training, and sometimes misguided political motivations, they inevitably reach their predetermined conclusions regardless of what they find. I have concerns about the IG's ability to reach these determinations if the investigators are underqualified and undereducated. Mr. O'Donnell, I believe, is on. Mr. O'Donnell, could you please describe? Yes, could you please describe for the subcommittee the challenges faced by the IG that are caused by manning shortfalls, by lack of training and education, and sometimes by misguided political motivations as the office attempts to work through what is supposed to be a nonpartisan process?
Thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. Pursuant to the IG Act, one of the requirements for someone to be an inspector general is that they be chosen without regard to their partisanship. I am the current IG at the Environmental Protection Agency. Excuse me, in that regard, I was chosen and confirmed by the Senate without regard to partisanship. And in everything I do, there is a objectivity as required by the Inspector General Act with respect to how we investigate, whether that's at the EPA or at the Department of Defense. I find that my colleagues at the Department of Defense are some of the best trained, most thorough, dedicated professionals that I have worked with. I have never once encountered a situation where one of my staff have had a predetermined decision and mustered the facts in support of that. Quite the contrary. Their thoroughness in collecting evidence and sorting through the evidence and informing an opinion is the model for what I think is the entire IG community. And so in that regard, Representative Jackson, I think that I'm very confident in our ability to, in the work that we undertake, to do it thoroughly and professionally. Obviously, resources are a challenge. As I said, we're much smaller relative to the size of the department than other OIGs, and that's why we rely on the defense oversight community. But with what we have and what we do, I think you won't find a finer OIG in the IG community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you're going to have to be on the lookout to make sure that this doesn't happen. I think that, this is my opinion, and I have served in the military, 25 years on active duty and 4 years in the reserves, and I think that there is an impression out there that a lot of times the IG approaches investigations with a predetermined conclusion at the beginning of the investigation, and I think that some people sometimes feel like, and this is active duty members speaking to me about this on a regular basis, even since I've been a member of Congress, obviously, that they feel like the due process is not completely there. So I would just say that that's a concern. I think...
Man's time has expired.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
All right. Ms. Jacobs, you will be first. When we return, we are going to suspend for, I guess, 20 minutes, and then return and continue the hearing. Thank you all. Again, I apologize that we have to go through this, but it is what we have to do presently. Thank you. the Military Personnel Subcommittee will reconvene. I think our next colleague who was going to testify, to ask questions, was going to be Ms. Jacobs, but I don't see her here yet.
I'm here, Madam Chair.
There you are. Okay, Ms. Jacobs, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I'd like to ask a question to the DOD IG first, and that is that despite sustained attention on the issue of sexual assault in the military by both Congress and the DOD, reports have continued to rise over the past decade. The Fort Hood Independent Review Committee report issued in November of 2020 found that implementation of sexual assault prevention response efforts at the installation was ineffective, and that the Army Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention Program is structurally flawed. Why are current efforts to prevent and respond to sexual assault in the military falling short, and how can DOD take more effective approach? In particular, how can the DOD IG and the services work better together and increase interoperability to combat this issue?
Representative Jacob, thank you for that question. I would say first, if you look at the work that we've done, particularly recently, you'll see that we have done a pretty good body of work here looking at sexual assault responses at the military academy, the service academies. We presently have ongoing work dealing with the special victims council. So this is an important issue for us. And then to amplify that, in the last NDAA, we were instructed to form a deputy IG position whose responsibility would be overseeing, among other things, the DOD's implementation of diversity and inclusion, which I've taken to include these issues that you raised, which have to do with sexual harassment, sexual assault. These are very important because they do serve as an impediment for morale, for recruitment. I just can't imagine the message it sends to mothers and fathers when they send their children, their teenagers to serve. And so this is something absolutely we're taking seriously. And with this new position that we've been given through the Congress, we'll be, I think, expanding that work. And one of the mandates of Section 554 that you gave us was closer coordination with the Department of Defense, but also with the service IGs.
Well, thank you, and thank you for acknowledging that. I hear from many military parents in my district about how fearful they are to be sending their young children, teenagers into the armed services, especially their daughters. A follow-up question: are service members that are assigned to a service IGs ever rotated out in the middle of an investigation, since we know that was a problem that was found at Fort Hood with the Army CID? And I was wondering if the same problem happens with other service IGs.
Now, thanks for the question. For us, the importance aspect is that we use the database, the IG database. So that means every case that is worked is in the system. So as that system is updated, they take that information, and even if an IG rotates, it's referred back and checked onto the others. Also, I have ultimate oversight on each one of those cases. So I have the responsibility to make sure every case is done and done to the standard as it needs to be.
Representative Jacobs, to your specific question, it is highly unusual for us in the Department of the Air Force that an IG initiates an investigation and in the middle of it suspends and hands off to somebody else. It does happen. It's infrequent. It's carefully handed off. And as my colleague here said, regardless of a handoff or not, the oversight is consistent.
Yeah, Congresswoman, in the sake of time, same thing on the Navy side. It may happen occasionally, but there is a very good handover, constant tracking of that case, and then oversight at my level.
Same thing, Congresswoman Jacobs. It's very rare that it happens, although it did happen during this last year since I've been on deck with an investigator that came down with COVID, and that happens. You've got to have, I think, a good checks and balance. You have to have a good case management system. I think we have a good one right now, so we're monitoring that when it happens, and if we have to turn somebody over, we do, but it is very rare.
All right. Well, thank you all for your responses and thank you for your service to our country. And Madam Chair, I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
I thank the gentlewoman for her questions. Are there any other members seeking to be recognized? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to ask my questions, and that will probably bring our hearing to a close. I would like for you to write these numbers down. Department of Defense, 1,750. Army, 1,441. Air Force, 1,886. Navy, 2,620. I don't have a number for the Marine Corps. How many staff does the IG have in the Marine Corps?
Ma'am, presently, I've got about 41 on my staff, and then I extend about another 30 that are inspectors that I pull in. That's just within my headquarters, ma'am.
Well, within the Marine Corps, the number of inspectors general that you have is how many?
Total, including our SIGs, I'll say it's probably somewhere in the 200 to 300 level, ma'am. But I'd have to get back to you on the
Would you
exact number.
please get back to us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what is, and let's talk about the caseload. How many contacts do each of you receive? Department of Defense?
Yeah, as I said in my opening statement, I think last year we, on our hotline, received 16,000 contacts,
Okay.
approximately.
Army?
I think in our assistance area is about between 55 and 60,000 assistance cases.
55 and 60,000. What do you mean by assistance cases?
So those are cases where personnel ask for information, and we consider those as contacts also.
Well, how many are complaints that are being filed?
The average complaints is about 7,000 cases, ma'am.
7,000.
Yes, Reverend Spear.
Air Force?
Chairman, over the last 3 years, we averaged 11,103
Per year or?
per year assistance requests from the IG.
Navy?
Yes, last year it was about 6,600 contacts or cases.
Marine Corps?
Last year was just over 2,000. I'd say half of those were assistance cases. So maybe half of those were contacts or complaints.
So 1,000.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. What this suggests to me is that the DOD IG is woefully understaffed. And in fact, when you have the Air Force and the Navy with more staff than the DOD Inspector General, I would suggest we have a problem. So I guess my first question is to you. What do you believe is the appropriate number for the Department of Defense? Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That's a difficult question in part because it's when do we need them, how can we get them, and bring them in. Do we need more? Absolutely. We need more because of the amount of mandatory work that we're doing required by Congress, which accounts for about 50% of our work. And then there's the discretionary work that we do, which diminishes. And then also there's the work that comes from requests from the Hill. So difficult for me to quantify. Happy to discuss this more. I know that we are currently looking to expand our workforce so that we can deal with Section 554, continue to do the work on the CARES Act. But yes, I absolutely agree. We could use more resources. We could use more manpower.
All right. So Inspector General O'Donnell, would you provide to the committee some working number that we can look at as part of the NDAA? Because these numbers are all out of whack, the way I look at them. The largest number is the Navy, and they have, next to the Marine Corps, the lowest number of complaints that are filed. I noticed that the Air Force has 740 civilians and the Navy has 740 civilians. I presume those civilians work within that office for long periods of time. What is the average length of time that a civilian works within each of your offices? Lieutenant General Said?
Chairwoman, I don't know the exact number, certainly much longer than our military members that rotate at a continuing cycle, but we'll get back to committee with the average duration. It's pretty extensive. They tend to stay for a while, become subject matter experts, and provide continuity.
Right, it makes sense. I mean,
It does. Ma'am, can I just offer one thing?
yes.
So the workload, when we said 103 assists or requests for assists from the IG, that's just on the investigation side, right? As we said before, we have to do inspections of every single unit.
No, I understand
For
that.
readiness on a recurring basis, and that's a huge workload in itself.
I understand that. In fact, one of the things members of Congress look at inspectors general as independent offices. When we look throughout the federal government, IGs are independent. They have subpoena power. They have, remarkable responsibilities and the ability to audit. To call the component IGs, in particular IGs, is a misnomer. And even in your roles, because part of your function has nothing to do with really the investigative function that we look at, the auditing function that we look at, the waste, fraud, and abuse function that we look at when we think of IGs, you may even be misnamed. But I do think that is what's creating part of our concern. So, where did we leave off? You were giving me, I think, Lieutenant General Said, you were telling me that you were going to get back to me on the average length of time for those who are civilians. And Admiral Snyder?
Yes, Chairwoman. I show that we have 495 civilian positions throughout the Navy IG enterprise, and I will have to take that for the record as well, ma'am, for the average length of service.
All right. So, Lieutenant General Smith, you indicated that in part of your review, you have just fired 2 IGs. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, more than just 2. So we've averaged last year of the 55 cases, there were about 20 that were fired. And it's not just command IGs, it's at every level. So if there are allegations, we have a professional reliability branch that they come in, it's a separate investigation, we have oversight, and they get due process, but if they don't follow what the requirements are, they lose their credentials, both military and civilian.
We're talking about IGs.
That's correct, ma'am.
So you have fired, what was the number again?
This year, it was 20 IGs out of the 55 allegations that were there.
Okay. How about for you, Lieutenant General Said?
Ma'am, I'll have to get back to you with the exact number. I haven't fired anybody. I have decredentialed. We take somebody out of an IG position if they don't perform to the level that we expect them to, if they have a conflict of interest, or if they become the subject of an investigation that is substantiated. They don't have any credibility at that point, so we automatically remove them. So I'll get back to you with a specific number. It's an automatic decredentialing instead of a so-called fire.
So where do they go then?
Depending on the severity of the issue, they might actually totally be discharged from the Air Force if it's really severe. If it's because the standards are so high to be the IG, they might be able to serve elsewhere because the severity of what was substantiated is acceptable to maybe with some mentoring to continue service, but certainly not in the IG. They would lose automatic credibility.
All right, so you'll get us those numbers. Admiral Snyder?
I've not fired anybody. We are in the process of, like the Army has set up, establishing a professional conduct review board to be able to specifically look at any concerns we have with the IG professionals.
So how many have you removed from the IG position they hold?
I have not removed any.
You have not removed anyone?
No.
All right.
Ma'am, of the 41s of the 41s that we have, I have not fired any of them.
All right.
Not yet. Again, I think we have a pretty good vetting process. We have denied a few from being brought on as SIGs because we did not or at least feel that they were the proper quality, but we have not had to fire anybody yet.
So Chairwoman Spear, I'd like to clarify one thing. So when we're talking about IGs, it's more than just the lieutenant colonel or colonel command IG. We're talking about subordinate IGs. So
I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. To you, Lieutenant General Smith, the FORSCOM IG went to Fort Hood and came back and reported, I presume, to General Garrett that everything was terrific, if you recall. Maybe he didn't use the word terrific, but he basically signed off, did a checklist, said, yes, everything is appropriate. We then had the Secretary of the Army stand up an independent committee. We've had a number of hearings with them here. They came back with a very critical report with 70 recommendations and underscored that the IG did an inadequate job. That's frankly what has piqued our interest in looking at the IG function generally, because we have a certain perception of what an IG is, and it would appear that it is, very different in application. So what happened to that IG?
Well, that IG, ma'am, is still in position. We have looked at learning from that mission from there by first assisting the Fort Hood Independent Review Team by providing them information. We've studied each one of those cases and expanded our survey pieces, which I think was a problem area from that, of not talking to enough people, not making sure that we had the right breakdown for the numbers of organizations or people that we talked to, and the right gender of
Lieutenant
people.
General, excuse me, but he failed. He absolutely failed in his job. He talked to very few people. He came back with the wrong assessment. He was criticized by this independent review committee, and he's still in his position.
Chairman Spear, I think the key thing is that we are a learning organization, and there's areas that we can improve in that organization. Now, I have spent time with that IG and others to make sure that we've done better.
If I'm a doctor and I perform a surgery inappropriately, if I create malpractice, I don't get to practice medicine anymore. I think that was investigative malpractice. And for that individual to still be in that position, I'm not suggesting he be fired, I'm suggesting he doesn't belong in that position. And that's part of the problem. We need to professionalize these component IGs and make them independent, or they're not going to provide the value that we expect from them.
Chairwoman.
What happens, how is it a component IG promoted? Who makes that call?
Chairwoman Spear, that is done by a central selection board, so it's not their commanders on the ground that selects them based off their overall background and their ability to move to the next level.
All right. I have just a couple more questions, and I thank the ranking member for hanging in here. How are each of these component IGs selected?
So, Chairwoman Spear, I select each one. We review with their background, with their previous OERs, and there's a interview process. After they are selected, they go through that 3-week extensive school, and we have periodically check-ins with them to make sure that they're executing their tasks as standard.
And they serve in that capacity, did you say for 4 years?
It's up to 4 years.
Could be as little as 2?
It could be as little as 2, but it varies based off the time. But the key aspect.
Have you considered hiring any civilians like the Navy and Air Force?
We do. Many of the deputies in the command component, as in Forces Command, have deputies or civilians that also work on the teams, and there are civilian
But they're
IGs.
not IGs.
They are IGs. And they
So how many IGs do you have that are civilians?
427, ma'am.
You have 427 IGs that are permanent,
That are civilian IGs, that's
that are
correct.
civilian IGs.
Right. It's in the documents that we provided, I think, to your
Okay,
earlier in the week.
I guess we missed that. All right. General Saeed?
Chairman Spear, so Central Assignment Board is typical in the Air Force. So our IGs are selected through that process. There are specific standards and specific insight into the type of person we're assigning into that position. So we're pretty selective of who ends up in the IG positions.
We, for the civilian IGs, they go through the civilian hiring process, so they have to meet certain standards in order to be qualified and eligible. Selection panel is then convened many times. Someone from my staff, this is at the command level, but someone from my staff oftentimes will sit on that selection panel. When they have a proposed candidate, it comes back to my office for vetting, and I have to provide my concurrence for that proposed hiree before they're hired. On the military side, it comes from the personnel system. We get an advanced copy of their record, and once again, I must approve their assignment as the IG.
General Castelli?
Yes, ma'am. For the civilian hires, the civilian hiring process, we do sit on those boards up at IG Marine Corps, and it's a collaborative process with the local commanders as well. Our Manpower and Reserve Affairs assigns officers to the commands. We vet those individuals working along with those commanders to make sure that we have the right Marines,
All right.
officers serving as SIGs.
AR 20-1. You heard the former Inspector General Hidell talk about this. I still can't get you all said that you're all independent. I presume that you believe that all your component IGs are independent. But you have an AR 20 that says the Army IGs work only for their commanders. They are the conscience of their commanders, that all IGs must understand their commanders' expectations, standards, visions, and personality. They are the confidant of the commander. So I want you to think about this. I'm not going to even ask you to answer it now. I would like for you to give us some written response. I don't know how that squares with being independent. And I am deeply troubled that we have a system here that, for the most part, does not provide the kind of oversight that we need. The only time that sexual assault was mentioned was not by any of you. It was mentioned by a colleague, and yet sexual assault and retaliation associated with sexual assault and sexual harassment is the big elephant in the room. It was former Inspector General Hidell who said that was a serious issue that Inspector Generals should be looking at. So I'm going to close with that. I'm not going to make a big deal about this, but Major General Castelvi, I met yesterday with family members of the AAV in which you were in charge of, and the deaths of those 9 Marines. And I must say, it's a very painful thing for all of us, but I don't quite understand how someone gets elevated to the position of an Inspector General after being in charge of that particular disaster. So with that, we'll stand adjourned.